All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks very much for joining. We'll go ahead and kick things off here and get rolling. So, my name is Alec, and I'm a technical account manager here at Accelo. I've been with the company for a bit over a year now, and I'm part of our customer success team. And I'm looking forward to be co-hosting another one of our live training webinars, which we definitely think will contain some really important content for all of y'all here today. I'm also joined by Banu, who is one of our senior professional services managers here at Accelo. And Banu has been with the company for a little over 5 years now, so she's got lots of experience dealing with Accelo configuration, and we're really looking forward to sharing her knowledge with you. Okay, let's take a quick look at the agenda. Now, I'm sure many of you have joined our past webinars as a part of our live training series, so you know that they are a bit different than a traditional webinar might be. But for those that might just be joining us for the first time, we'll go ahead and give you a quick overview. So all of the areas that we cover in the live training webinars are actual use cases that real clients have asked us during expert services or implementation sessions. And we'll take a couple minutes later on today just explaining how expert services works to give you all some more context. But yeah, then before the Q&A at the end, we'll be doing a quick overview of our community forum, as well as taking a few minutes to announce the winners of the trigger contest, which was posted in our community a few weeks ago. Some more details on this to come later on, but first, just a quick thank you to everyone who participated in this contest. Now, I'm sure some of you might be wondering what triggers are, especially if you might be a little bit new to the software. So briefly put, triggers are Accelo's not so secret method to enable really true automation in the system. The way that it works is it basically allows us to configure specific rules which trigger, certain business processes or actions as we call them, which run in the background while we can go ahead and focus on the work that requires our undivided attention. And today's session in particular is covering sales automation and triggers. And this webinar is actually pretty special because it's going to be the start of our series on triggers that we'll be running, with trigger sessions for projects, retainers, and tickets coming up in the future. So be sure to be on the lookout for those. And many of these configuration options that we'll be sharing are going to be geared for system administrators. So today's session is really just going to be geared for folks who have access to triggers in sales configuration. But the good part is that when triggers and automations are implemented correctly, they can really provide a lot of value to your end users. And these automations can help them get notified when important conditions arise so that they can act accordingly. And it also can help them save time in their day-to-day work. And real quick here, the topics that we're going to be covering today include understanding the logic of triggers and how to use them, re-engaging cold prospects with powerful reminders, tracking key dates such as the quote due date for following up, and then lastly, how to update company statuses based on the status of your sales. Now, if you guys have any questions along the way, please go ahead and add them into the Zoom Q&A feature that's built into the bottom panel of the application. And we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can during the live Q&A at the end, but naturally we won't be able to. But that's all good because we'll be responding to every single question via email after the session. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and kick things off. So, Banu, our team deals with triggers a lot during expert services sessions. And given your experience, when do you recommend that users start implementing triggers in their Accelo deployments?
Yeah, so triggers are considered to be one of the more advanced aspects of Accelo, and usually we recommend digging into these after you've gotten the basics set up. Now, this can be different for every team, of course, but we've usually seen that the best time frame for the average user is after the team has been actively using Accelo for about 2 to 3 months. We found that familiarity with the user interface definitely helps when it comes to understanding how triggers will behave, and also to help in deciding which triggers you actually do need.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate the context there. That's good to know. So one of the common scenarios that gets brought up from our clients is, they wonder how they can use Accelo to improve the level of engagement on their sales. As we all know, it's really easy to forget about them and have things accidentally fall through the cracks, which is never ideal. So, with that being said, would you be able to show us, just show us and the audience some best practices for setting up some triggers to, combat this common challenge that businesses face?
Yeah, absolutely. Sales is, after all, about nurturing our potential clients and staying engaged after all. So we can definitely set a variation of triggers to remind us to check in with our leads. So let me show all of you here today how we can create one of the more basic ones for us to start thinking about triggers like these. Let me go into the Accelo account, okay? And first, let us go look at where all our sales triggers would live and have a go at getting that set up. So I'm going to jump into settings right there. Okay. And then we want to go into sales. That's the one with the funnel icon there, just in case anybody named it something else. And then you want to go into types, progressions, and fields. Okay. Let it open up there. There we go. Something to note is that you can have different triggers for different sales types, or also create same ones for each of these types. Now, I always recommend, though, keeping types to a minimum, though, just for the ease of maintenance of both the triggers and your status and progressions, because God forbid, one thing changes and you have to update 10 different types. We definitely don't want that, okay? So let's go on to look at where our triggers would be. So we pick the type that we want. I'm just going to choose the existing client right here and then go into triggers. Okay. Now, don't be surprised to already see a trigger in there called stale sale example. This is just a trigger that comes with every Accelo account to get you started. If you want to use this, just go. All you'll have to do really is to review it, update some of the rules there, and then turn it on. For today, though, I'm going to create a brand new one, just in case we have users that may have deleted it, and also to cover the full process of getting a trigger created. So I'm going to go ahead and select the new trigger right there. Okay. Now, when setting up a trigger, there are three areas that we're going to need to think about. Okay. The first one with the trigger name and type. This here would contain all the basics of like what the trigger is for, when it should run, as well as its frequency. Then we'll set up the rules and finally the action or the business process we want Accelo to perform when the rules are met. Okay, so let's start off with naming this trigger. I found that it's usually really helpful to state the specifics of the trigger in the title so that it's clear for anyone looking at it. In this case, let's say we'd like to be sure that we are in contact with our lead at least once in every 14 days for as long as the sale is open. So I might put in something like, I'll just call it stale sale because it's gone stale if it's been more than 14 days since we spoke to them. So stale sale, 14 days since any outbound interaction. Okay. Then we need to select the trigger type. We have two options. You've got the ongoing and you've got the event option. Ongoing triggers will continuously run and check rules in the background and then fire. Then you also have event triggers. Event triggers will only run when certain events occur, like when a contact emails us, and then we will run that action that we've set, okay? Now we're going to want the ongoing trigger option for the one that we're setting up right now, okay? Then we've got trigger operation times. This is to control when the trigger will fire. We want to ensure that if, for example, we are sending out email notifications, we do it during the work hours when someone will be more likely to look into it. So we could do something like Monday to Friday and just deselect Saturday and Sunday there and select the time range to be from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Okay. And you can also get really specific here, maybe Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Maybe because we want to action these notifications first thing each morning and then perhaps spend the rest of our day away from email and on meetings instead, okay? Or just on other stuff. So definitely consider your team's work habits and best practices when determining this, okay? Next, right at the bottom, we've got your trigger repetition. These here ensure that we are not bombarded with repetitive alerts. In this situation, we want to ensure that the team connects to their potential client at least once in 14 days. So once the first alert has been triggered, we will want to give the team a few days to action this, but we don't want them to forget about it. So what we can do is set this up to run again to allow it to fire more than once and allow it to run again 3 days later if the rules still meet. So basically, we fire the first alert if it's been 14 days since anybody has reached out. 3 days later, we're going to check to see if there has been any outbound interaction. Did someone follow up? If there wasn't anything still in that 14-day time frame, then we're going to fire again and we're going to repeat and fire every 3 days until we see an email go out in that last 14-day time frame. Okay. And definitely, this is another spot here that you can make the number of days be what makes most sense for your team. Okay. So now let's go ahead and configure our rules. Now that we've got this page done, I'm going to hit save and next. Okay. So now with the rules, our triggers are very literal, so it's really important that we set good parameters. Hot tip, it is best practice to include a status rule with most of the triggers that you're going to create in Accelo. The status rule will always ensure that the trigger is only going to run when the sale is still relevant for us. Okay, and definitely shout out to our engineers for adding it as the first rule by default, helping us be reminded of this. Okay. Yeah, I can't tell you the number of times I forgot myself. So I'm glad this is here. Now, let us consider this. Do we want to ensure that we are always engaging at least once every 2 weeks for the whole time there are potential with us? If so, we would add is one off and I guess lead, qualified, and quote requested. Okay. So what we're saying is that we want to stay engaged from the time they're a lead with us all the way down to the time that we've got a quote sent out to them. Okay. For some teams, though, it may make more sense to not be as strict with the engagement early on, but perhaps only after we've maybe qualified them and the talks have become more serious. If so, just feel free to leave out that lead status there. All right. Now, the next rule that we're going to set is going to be for the outbound interaction parameters. So we're going to choose the sales activity and say it's been at least 14 days since any outbound interaction. Okay. Now, if any of you track engagement based on inbound emails, you can always switch this out. Okay. And have it be since any inbound interaction too. So basically, you're going to be alerted if it's been 14 days since the potential client has reached out to us. Okay. Now, there is one other rule that we're going to need here, and that would be to define the sale created date. So I'm going to select sales field, and then I'm going to look for the created date, and I'm going to say that the created date of the sale would have to be in the past more than 14 days ago. Now, remember how I said our triggers are quite literal? Without this rule here, we'd probably fire this day one because we wouldn't be able to find any outbound emails that happened in the last 14 days, making these above rules here true on their own. So this specific rule here will make it clear that we want to start tracking engagement only from the time that the date was, the sale was created. Okay. And if we choose to start tracking engagement after only after we've qualified that sale or that lead or any other status, then you can change this date field here to reflect the date that you put it in that status to ensure that we only start the count of 14 days from that time onwards. Okay. Yeah, so those are the 3 rules we're gonna need. So let's now move on to define what should occur when the rules are met. So I'm going to hit save and next and move into the actions tab. Okay. Yeah, so what do we want to happen? And we've got a couple of options here. We have the ability to update a field. This would be to automatically update a field when it's been 14 days and we want to maybe work off a filtered list of sales to follow up when we get the time. we have the ability to create an activity. This would be to send a notification when like an email alert, essentially, when the rules are met. We can create a task or a to-do for when the rules are met, that we can, and this to-do that we can block off time for and then action the follow-up. We also have the ability to change the status or update the status of the sale. So this is another way that maybe we can just move the status to a sale status even, or an abandoned status, and just put it, keep it as part of a separate queue altogether. And you also have the option of sending webhooks. Okay, webhook, you do have the ability to expand beyond Accelo and use triggers and webhooks to trigger business processes in other platforms that your team uses as well. Now, the most common action I've seen for this type of trigger would usually be to either create an activity or a task so that the salesperson will be alerted that this sale requires their action. Use an activity if all you need is just an email reminder, or use a task instead if you want to make sure that we block off the salesperson's schedule to connect with the lead and then have them intentionally mark that task as completed. Typically, though, we find that salespeople work better with reminders like an activity, because they don't usually end up actioning tasks so much. So let's definitely use this activity version, okay? So right here, we're going to define what that email notification will look like, okay? So first, we're going to need to define a sender. And you can default it to just be the salesperson or yourself, or maybe the sales manager even. So let's select Michael Scott there. Then the next step will be to define who the notification should go out to. Should it go out to the salesperson? And most of the time, it usually is just the salesperson that's responsible for that record, so they can follow up. And we can use one of the defaults right here. But if at any time you want to send it to a specific individual, or if you want to copy maybe the sales manager, you can always type in their name here in the recipient list as well. Okay. Then you've got the action title. This is really an internal title, and it could be really simple. This is just really like the title of the alert here. Okay. And then you've got the subject. The subject of the email is what the recipient is going to see first in their inbox. So it could be a little bit more specific. Maybe give them anything that would give them a prompt, or a little reminder that, hey, this is a company. I see this company name. I spoke to them last week. I definitely want to follow up with them right away because they were really interested in our services. And then finally, we have the content. Okay, so I do this all the time with my clients. So I usually have like a glossary of templated emails. So this one, what I have here is a list of all like the key merge fields that I've seen used most often. We don't always use all of it at the same time. You can definitely pick and choose what's relevant to you, but these are the common ones, okay? So we might first have, the reason they're receiving this alert. So they're receiving this because it's been 14 days. And then some key details about the sale itself. So the status here would be really important because, they'll probably want to know, hey, is this still a lead? Have we qualified? Or has the quote been requested and we haven't reached out to them, so they can immediately jump on it? The value of the sale will give them a good idea as well on priority. Any key comments, maybe the client's on vacation until October, so no need to follow up until we get the next alert or the next couple of alerts. And then also, because this is a follow-up alert, sometimes it can be really helpful to put in some contact information as well. So they open the email, and they just they have the phone number right there. They pick up the phone, they call the client. Okay. One thing that always remains a constant in all triggers we usually set would be the link to view the record. Okay, this merge field can be found up top there. There we go, link to view the sale. And this one we found to be really helpful because, again, you're viewing that email from wherever you are with that one click that can take you directly to the record for you to take on your next steps. Or even, view the history on the stream before you decide, what your next step should be. So definitely recommend that one there. All right. So once the content has been set, we'll just want to hit save. Okay. And I just want to go back to one thing actually. If I can go back just to that first page there and come back to that fire delay. Now this fire delay here definitely makes sense because we're sending an email alert, and we definitely want to check in and make sure someone sent something in every 3 days. We want to do that check and follow up, right? But if you're setting up a task or maybe updating a status or something, you probably don't need this to occur every 3 days. Maybe for a task every 14 days is fine, right? They just follow up, and then once it's completed, they get the next task the 14 days after. And for status and fields, probably just a one time. They only need to run the one time, perhaps. Okay, just something to consider. All right. So once we've set up the trigger, we can go ahead, hit save and close, and yeah, you'll be good to go after you turn it on.
All right. Appreciate the excuse me. Appreciate the detailed run through there, Banu. Here's another one for you. So this also gets brought up from our clients, and it's basically in regards to they don't have a great way to keep track of their sales during
Mm-hmm.
that quoting or that proposal process. So an example being that they might want to get notified when that actual quote or proposal due date passes so that they can act accordingly. So with that being said, would you be able to show us how to set something like this up using triggers?
Absolutely. And this quote follow-up trigger is actually one I set up for all my clients in implementation too. And it would actually be really similar to the one we just set up. And actually, you're going to find that all triggers that help with following up tend to follow the same structure. So let's use the same trigger card we created previously so we can compare how similar they both actually are. Okay. Definitely want to update the title there, and we want it to be as specific as possible. So follow up on quote, and maybe in 14 days. Maybe we give our clients 14 days to respond to us. Okay. And it'll probably be another email alert that we want to receive. So again, office hours would be fantastic. The trigger fire delay here, maybe 3 days wouldn't make sense, might be a little bit much here. Maybe after that first 14 days of radio silence, perhaps, maybe we only want to remind ourselves of it again every 7 days thereafter. So again, whatever makes more sense for you. Then we can set up the rules. We still want the status rule, but this time we want to make sure that we are only tracking the criteria only while we are in that quote sent status or negotiation status, right? Because we want to make sure the quote has been sent before we fire off any kind of alert. And then this one here is interesting. You can decide to keep it, but if you do, you might want to switch it to inbound interaction actually. This way, we can track to see, has there been anyone writing into us, even though we're still in that quote status and we haven't, progressed it? Has there been anyone writing in? Has there been some back and forth? Because then maybe we can safely assume that, negotiations are going on and we don't need any alert unless there's absolute radio silence. So that's something to consider. And then finally there, we will also need that date field. This time though, instead of create a date, we want that quote sent date. We want to make sure that it has actually been 14 days since the quote has been sent, and it's also been 14 days since we've heard back from the client, and we haven't, the sale has a progress, and then fire and let us know it's due so we can follow up. Okay. And of course, this would actually only work really if all our quotes have a 14-day term, right? If we do have quotes that have a variation in term length, then what we might want to do is to actually use a due date option. So when a quote is sent, we can get the team to ensure they update the due date of the sale. And that way we can track based on the due date, and only when the due date is in the past and probably just by 1 day, really. So if, the sale date, the due date has met and it's 1 day later and we still haven't progressed and there's no inbound interaction, let's fire this trigger here. Okay. And then the final step there would be to update the action. Of course, this time you want to make the content to be more relevant to to where we are in that sale. Okay, so following up on the quote. Yeah, and then let's just save that.
All right. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. It's kind of like having a personal assistant or something like that to, tell you when you need to follow up on things so that you can, give yourself some peace of mind and move on to some other sales opportunities without having to worry about what's on the back burner and things like that. Just as a quick reminder, take a quick, not a break, but just want to let you all know, please feel free to throw any questions that you have in the Q&A feature in Zoom. We definitely want to try to get some of these questions answered during the Q&A, but like I said before, if we're not able to get to yours because of the volume or of the complexity, we'll always follow up with you guys afterwards. So yeah, just a quick reminder for you. And then also, kind of going off of what Banu was going through here, it's nice to see that once you have the rules or the bones, whatever you want to call it, in place with a trigger, making adjustments to it for different scenarios is pretty easy to do. And I think that this really hammers home the point that, after you understand the logic of triggers and create a few on your own to test out, this stuff will kind of become like second nature to you after a bit of time. All right, so we've got one last scenario to run by you here, Banu. So when working with prospects, they're going to become an active client after we've been able to sell them their first set of services, whatever that might be, right? So when this occurs, the sales rep or someone else's responsibility is typically then required to update that company status to active or active customer, whatever you have in your deployment, updating it to active instead of being in that lead status. So with that being said, could you show us how to automate that process in Accelo?
Yeah, definitely. With this one though, we're gonna have to set the stage a little bit. And we're gonna set the stage on both sales and company, since we need both of those records to kind of interact with each other. So the first step would be for us to create a field that we can update when the sale is won. Okay. So I'm going to go into companies and I'm going to create that custom profile field on companies there. And I'll explain in a little bit why I'm putting it on companies instead of a sale. Okay. So I'm going to add that field and we could call it anything. So first sale one, question mark, put a select field, no, yes. And then I'm going to check the exclusive box. So something to note is anytime you want Accelo to update a field through a status progression, through a trigger, or you just want to edit it from the edit page, we definitely want to choose this exclusive option. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Then the next thing we'll want to do is to have the system update this field that we just created when a sale is won. To do that, I'm going to go back into sales, types, progressions, and fields. I've got my two types, and we'll probably only use the new client option, right? Because they are the ones that we'll need to update the status on. So we'll go to the one progression. I'm going to hit the plus add action, and we're going to use the update field, and we're going to update that field that we had just created. So right here, I have the ability to say, hey, look at all, let's update a field that we created on companies. Okay. And then I'm going to pick that field that we set up, and I'm going to mark it as default as yes. I'm going to make it hidden because nobody needs to worry about this. It can just be automated. Save it. Okay. So now that's done, we can go back and set our trigger. We can go back, and we're going to go back to companies and contacts because we are going to set the trigger on companies because it is the company status that we want to update. All right. So let's go into triggers. Let's add a new trigger. And let's try to be specific here. Sale one, convert to active. Okay. And we want this to be ongoing, always checking, and this can happen at any point in time. And really, we only need this to happen once because once that first sale is won, they're going to be active and then always active, right? Then we'll set up the rules. We definitely need this status because we only want this trigger to run if the company is in a lead status. And only then, and ignore the rest. And then the next rule will be where we set that to look at that field, right? update that first field 1, and if it is a yes. Now, this here is the reason why we created that custom field on the company. Because you can see on this trigger, I cannot pull in fields from any other aspect of Accelo, but only from companies. So I have to create the field on companies. Okay. So once that's done, let's save it. And then we want to add an action. And the thing that we want to do is to actually change the status. Okay. And we want to change it to active. And let's just name this from lead to active. This here is just the internal title for this action here. Okay. Yeah, and there you have it. This should do what you need it to do. When the sale is 1, we're going to update that field. And when that field is updated, that trigger is going to look at that field and say, oh, this is yes. If the status is lead, let's update and change that status to active. Yeah, so all you see left to do here is to just send it on.
All right, good stuff. Yeah, I appreciate your time there, Banu, and for enlightening us a little bit. Yeah, so that is all that we have for the content piece today. And what y'all have seen today are some examples as to how you can optimize Accelo to automate your business processes. And, while triggers are pretty intuitive, once you build a few of them out and, kind of get the hang of them, we're definitely always here to help if you'd like another set of eyes on what you're trying to implement. And this is where our expert services program can really help and provide some immense value. Our professional services managers have tons of experience creating triggers for our clients, no matter how niche or how unique their business processes might be. And expert services sessions are really like consultative in nature, and we listen and understand how you operate and then present you with some recommendations based off of your use case. And they're really customized to help you solve any complex problems that you might be running into. And then, of course, to help you optimize some processes in place just to make things run a little bit more smoothly and things like that. And as we can see in the slide here, some examples of what could be covered include assistance when you need to tackle challenges and find some quick resolutions. We also do advanced end user training, focus on the topics that are most important to you or your team members. And then, of course, detailed account audits to evaluate your current config and then make recommendations for improvement. And this last bullet point in particular falls most in line with what we've seen today. And for folks with more complex and unique processes, we can also assist with adding additional custom fields to keep track of important information, on the way or along the way during your workflows. And as we've seen in this webinar, these custom fields can also be used as the rules for the foundation of your triggers and automations. So yeah, if you're interested in finding out more about expert services, you can email success@accelo.com, and an account manager such as myself will arrange a 30-minute, no obligation scoping call to understand some of your challenges and propose some sessions to resolve them for you. And you can also find more information about this on our Success Services webpage. And for reference, that website is www.accelo.com/resources/services. And we'll go ahead and share this in the chat now for you. And we also wanted to take some time to highlight the Accelo community. And the goal of the community is to provide you all with a single location you can go to stay in the know about everything to do with Accelo, and then of course to connect our clients together. And on our community, we've got a support forum, which you can access to ask some questions and get advice from our trained support engineers. We've also got a developer forum where you can go to discuss, share ideas, and ask some questions about what can be done with our open API. And we've also got a user groups forum, which is a dedicated place where you can go to ask questions, get advice, and bounce ideas off of other Accelo users to see how they're utilizing the system. And last but certainly not least, we have our knowledge base. And this is a growing repository of help articles that are created by our support engineers, which you can access on your own if you ever run into anything and get stumped and don't want to email support or whatever, that kind of thing. So yeah, with that being said, we highly recommend that everyone goes to community.accelo.com and registers to be a part of our community. And for any folks that are on the webinar who are already registered, thank you very much for doing so, and we really hope that you're liking it so far. Okay, and speaking of the community, and also while we're on the topic of triggers, we wanted to take a quick minute to highlight some of the most creative triggers that we've seen in our community as part of our trigger contest. And this contest was posted to the user groups forum a few weeks back as a way to spark some engagement in the community and then also give our clients some ideas as to how they can use triggers in their own processes. And we'll be having another contest in our community in the coming months with more prizes to give away, so please stay tuned for that if you didn't get a chance to participate this time. For this particular contest, each one of the winners we announce here will receive a $100 gift card as well as an Accelo swag pack. And we want to sincerely thank everyone for taking the time out of their busy days to submit their favorite triggers for this contest. And we just want to let you know it was a really hard decision for us to make as there were some incredible submissions in the community. So yeah, thanks in advance for your participation. Okay, and without further ado, let's go ahead and announce the winners. So first up, we have Susan Nitzberg from Sierra Leadership in the United States. Sierra Leadership is an executive coaching firm that uses projects to track their client engagements. And some of their engagements include a set number of sessions, and they need to find out how to they needed a way to keep track of how many of those sessions have been used. And to do this, they use a combination of statuses and custom fields to control a trigger that decreases the number of sessions after each meeting has been held. And they've also got that trigger set up to send an email to a staff member to let them know that it's time to schedule the next session with the client. And we picked this trigger because we thought it was a very clever way to keep track of and automate client work in Accelo. And these triggers have a variety of rules and action types built into them, which clearly show how comfortable they are with creating them. So great job, Susan. Keep up the good work. And okay, up next we have Ash Christophers from Austep Lighting in Australia. Austep Lighting is in the lighting business, and their products help save their customers money on power bills. And they work with prospects frequently, and on each proposal they send out, they provide an estimate as to how much money they'll save if they decide to move forward with their products. And sometimes, when the sales go stagnant, they'll use a trigger to automate emails to their prospects every 6 months to remind them how much savings that they're missing out on as time kind of goes along. This trigger in particular uses a status rule to send emails for sales that have been quoted, and also uses a date field to track when the quote was sent out. That email notification that gets sent out includes a custom field which documents the total amount of savings that the prospects are missing out on. So we chose this trigger not only because it aligns perfectly with our topic on sales automation, but also because we thought it was a great marketing pitch and a way to create that sense of urgency for prospects so that they truly know what they're missing out on. So good job on that one, Ash. All right, coming up next we have Charlotte Boyle from Switch over in Jersey. And for those who might not know, because sadly enough, I didn't know this myself, but Jersey is a country that's located slightly above France. Switch is a creative digital agency helping their clients grow through connected web technologies. They use Google Drive for all of their working files and really needed a way to tie Google Drive together with Accelo. And they found that manually creating a folder structure in Drive every time manually creating a Google Drive folder every time that they add a new client became a little bit time consuming and had the potential for human error. So they created a trigger to automate this process in Accelo. And they're using the send webhook action once a client becomes active. And then they use Zapier to create the client folders and subfolders in Google Drive. And on top of that, they use Zapier to send a Slack notification to their account management channel to let them know that a new client has been added. And we chose this trigger because of the very clever use of that send webhook action, as it's usually overseen by most of our clients, and just really goes to show that, when utilizing automation inside of Accelo, in conjunction with third-party tools such as Zapier, you can really automate lots of business processes and produce some pretty cool results. So thanks for posting that one, Charlotte. All right, and last but not least, we have Tara Godoy from Godoy Medical Forensics in the United States. Godoy Medical Forensics provides forensic advice for criminal cases that need medical witnesses, and they've got a variety of experienced, registered nurses on staff. And because of that, they're able to offer lower rates than most doctors who might offer those same types of services. And they've got some clients who require that they need to be invoiced monthly, which is outside of their normal operating procedures. And to accommodate this, they've created a trigger so that whenever the phrase hashtag monthly is included inside of a custom profile field on their companies, then a task gets created to remind their accounting person to check for any outstanding billing in Accelo. We chose this trigger because we thought it was a really good use case for utilizing keywords in custom fields to drive automations across the business. And on top of that, it's a really great reminder to the business to ensure that they don't miss out on any potential revenue. So awesome job, Tara, and also great job to all the winners. Congratulations. So as mentioned before, y'all are going to be receiving a $100 gift card and an Accelo swag pack as a gift from us to say thanks for sharing your innovative ideas to the rest of the community. And what we'll do now is we'll be sharing a link to all of the trigger submissions we've received in this contest via the chat now. So we highly encourage y'all to click in there and take a peek and see what other folks are, using Accelo for. It might give you some ideas for the future. Okay, so with that being said, I think it's time for some Q&A. We've seen some questions come through the chat, so I'm going to pull some of them out for us to discuss. Just give me 1 second here. So, all right, here's a pretty interesting one here for you, Banu, kind of complex. So we categorize our leads based on several different criteria. And some of the criteria we look at are the location of the client and the value of the sale. So for example, a local client with a potential value of more than $50,000 is a sale that we want to prioritize. So with that being said, is there a way for us to automate the priority of sales based off of this criteria?
Yeah, that's a good one. Let's go back into Accelo and our sales triggers and have a look. Okay, so let's create a new trigger. Just going to create a new trigger there. So we'll definitely want to define a title as always. So priority, so we want to do local, right? And I'm here out in Toronto, so I'll say Toronto plus 50,000, 50K equals high priority or something like that. Don't mind. Yeah, there we go. High priority, something like that. It'll be an ongoing trigger because we are going to set the rules based on the criteria you mentioned, and we want the system to always be booking and then fire and update the priority of the sale. I think this can happen at any point in time and probably only happen once. Then let's set up the rules. Okay, first we need the status. And I guess with something like this, we probably want it to happen. We want this to be able to fire at any point in time, as long as the sale is not already won or lost or unqualified. Probably not when it's in the closing status as well, because we've probably, passed that point. Then we're going to set the rules based on the criteria you mentioned. So we'll have sales field. And then we'll have value because you mentioned that we want 50K or above. So we'll want to use is greater than or equal to 50,000. And then the other one we said was location. So if we look at the sales field here, we don't have one on location. If we look at company fields, looks like we don't pull addresses in our triggers. But you know what? That should still not stop you at all. What you could do is have a field created. And this goes for any trigger, right? If you need to look at a specific criteria, what we can do is create a field. And in this situation, a field called location, and have the team who's creating these sales be sure to add that location in there, and then we can use that in the trigger. Or alternatively, you could have the team maybe put it in the title, maybe in the sales title, because what we can do while setting up the trigger right now is look at the sales title, and the sales title contains Toronto, then let's go ahead and prioritize it. So our action here would be to update a field, right? Your priority field. So you might have a whole list of ways that you prioritize. The built-in way that Accelo prioritizes sale would be the star rating, which I hope you're familiar with. So we can use that one there. So we can say, hey, if it's 50K and the sale is in from Toronto, let's move this and give it a 5-star rating. Yeah, so that would, I think, help us with getting that set up. And actually, you could also do a different version of this trigger. And maybe when a high priority sale is closing, so again, if it's Toronto more than 50K in a closing only status, maybe you can actually send an alert to the Toronto project team to let them know that a big project is coming their way as well. That's another thing we could do here. Yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, that was good. Thanks, Banu. Alrighty, so here's another one for you. Um, I think this is kind of following up based off of something that you were showing in the webinar, but is
Yeah.
the quote sent field
Mm-hmm.
automatically updated when the quote is sent, or does it require the sale manager updating it manually on the sale?
That's a good question. Let's go back into status and progressions. It could be either option. Now, I think a lot of the Accelo accounts actually come with the quote sent date already created. And by default, I think we might have a version where we put it as part of the progression. But let me just show you really quick, if you didn't have that, how you can set it up. Your first step would be to go into either custom fields or custom profile fields. Custom fields is the date is only applicable to the type that you're viewing, so maybe only existing sales types. And you want to create that quote sent date. So have that field created there. Now that you have the field, you can go into status progressions and you can go to that progression where, the quote sent progression there, and you can add a field, okay, to update that field, okay, sorry. Add that action to update the field. And I already have this here, okay? So you're going to, basically what this will do is to make sure that when you progress the sale to quote sent, it will let the system automatically, I'll click on this, update the quote sent date, and you can set it to just say today. So update it to the day that you click that status. And because it's automated, you can also have it be hidden so that nobody really comes across it, and it's just going to be automatic. And if you did want someone to manually update it, you can always ensure it's not hidden, and then have a default be today, but then give the person that's progressing there the option of changing it to another date as well. So you do have both options.
All right, good deal. All right, so here's another one. It's kind of on the topic of like dates and stuff like that. So, how can we keep track of our longer term sales using triggers to ensure that we don't forget about them?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that one could also kind of follow in the same vein as the follow-up ones that we were looking at. So let me just open up that card so we can think about how similar they can be, how similar they really are. We'll go into rules, okay? So because this one here you mentioned is a long-term sale, chances are we would have updated that sale to a different status, like a long-term status. And I have, yeah, so we could say that the sales field status is a long-term one, okay? Or you might have stale or anything like that. And then we probably don't need any inbound interaction or outbound interaction, but you can still keep it. It can be helpful for the follow-up reminders. And so we can always check, after the first alert is triggered, when should we check back again? Should we check back if in the next 45 days we haven't heard anything, etc. So you can keep it or choose to ignore it. And then the due date here would be the date that you put it either in the long-term status. So say if you're thinking, I want to follow up in 6 months for all of those sales that I put in that status, then it could be that long-term date, and I don't have that one there, but again, you saw how we can create one. And then has it been 6 months? Or you could also, what I do have here is a follow-up date. Basically, if you put that, it'll be also really good practice actually when you put something in that long-term queue. Always have some team member there. Update that follow-up date because you do have the plan and the intention to follow up. So it's just best to put that follow-up date in there. So if the follow-up date is today, then fire the alert and let the sales manager there know, the sales lead know that, hey, this one, it's now time for us to check in on this sale here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. All right, so here is another one for you. What if we want to track inbound and outbound communication on our sales using triggers? Would that be possible?
Yeah, absolutely. You can have more than one rule. So you could have one for inbound and could have another one for outbound as well. The only thing to note is that our rules are end, so it'll fire only if it's 14 days since any inbound and 14 days since any outbound, not either or.
Gotcha. All right, that makes sense. I think that we've got time for one more here, Banu, and then we'll wrap up. So this
Okay.
one kind of is in relation to the last thing that you showed us in the webinar with using that kind of sale and company triggers in combination with each other.
Yeah.
But this one is asking, is there a way to create a trigger to move a company status from lead
Mhm.
to inactive if we haven't moved a quote from, basically we haven't moved a quote from to one or lost in a certain time frame, like 90 days or something like that.
Oh yeah. That would definitely require actually more than one trigger to handle. All right. So the first thing we want to do, kind of like you mentioned, the one where we updated the status on the company, we need to create that field. Now, I don't think I'll be able to show the entire setup of it, so I'll walk you through. And if anybody has more questions, we can definitely go through the details later. But the first thing we want to do is make sure we set up that field, right? And this one would be, so, has it been 90, maybe something like, has it been 90 days since quote was sent, or no progress, or something, slow progression on quote or something like that? Yes, right? So we have that so that the company trigger can look at that to update that lead to be inactive. But how do we get that? Then you need the second trigger to be very similar to follow up on quote. This one here, we want to follow up on the quote when it's been 14, if it's been 14 days since we sent out the quote, right? So this one, what we can do is have it be the quote sent date is in the past more than 90 days ago. We don't need anything, we don't need that interaction one, because the goal is if it's been 90 days since and we haven't progressed anywhere, then we want to update a field, and that will be that field that we set up on the company side. We're going to update that field to be slow progress, yes. And then, and then now that second trigger that we set on the companies will look at that field, and if it's yes, then change the status to inactive.
All
Yeah,
right. Yeah, makes sense. Definitely a little complex
I
there,
hope.
but yeah, appreciate the walkthrough there. All right. So yeah, this does bring us to the end of our live training webinar today. We really hope that this was helpful for y'all. And like we mentioned before, any questions that didn't get answered in the live Q&A, we'll get to via email as soon as possible. And yeah, we'd just like to say thanks for everyone for joining today. And we'll be sending this video recording to you guys along with a feedback survey. And in that survey, you're gonna see that there's a space for you to include topic areas that you'd like to see covered in future webinars. And we've got a number of them already planned, but we'd definitely like to hear from y'all to see what kinds of things you might like to see in some future sessions. So you'll be receiving an invitation to these future webinars, and this recording will also be available on our website. So that's all that we have for today. Take it easy, everyone. Bye for now.